You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is May 28th, 2025, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest with us. We have the National Libertarian Committee Chair, Stephen Nekhaila, and he's here, and we're going to find out all about him. He's recently elected chair, so it's going to be a great interview. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel. In our lower right-hand corner, we have James Just. He is normally our invisible hand, but he's very visible tonight. And in our lower left-hand corner, we have Stephen Nekhaila. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So we always start out, first of all, we're going to hit the... We are going to hit the interview, but after we hit the interview, as far as other topics go, we're also going to talk about the big, beautiful budget. So, bill, which is, kind of a big, scary thing for a lot of libertarians out there. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some recent Maha news as well, too, at the very end. But before we get into any of that, what we always do to start the show off is we always start with our Liberty quote of the day. And this one, I think, kind of is a foreshadowing of maybe what could happen if we don't get serious about our debt issues. And this one is from Ariel Durant, and she is a co-author of The Story of Civilizations and a winner of the Medal of Freedom in 1977. And what she said is, a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within. And I mean, to me, that's like how Rome fell, right? I mean, they watched their money go to, from precious metals to pot metals. And that was kind of the sign of the end. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, a lot of those signs here as well. What do you guys think of this quote? I really think it's really foreshadowing potentially events to come.
I think it's a phenomenal quote. I mean, it's completely true. Our biggest enemy isn't a foreign adversary. It's not Russia or China or some country in the Middle East. It's, quite frankly, it's within our own borders. I think our biggest enemy is what's going on in Washington, D.C. I think there's a bit of a spiritual malaise going on in the United States. I think a lot of young people, probably the most of anybody, have lost faith in the institutions of the United States. And there's sort of this cultural nihilism that I think is starting to permeate. And the good news for libertarians is it brings people to the libertarian philosophy, because when folks have sort of lost hope in the system, then they start looking for answers. And I believe libertarianism is one of those answers that answers a lot of the questions, especially politically. And as you can see what's happening in Argentina with Javier Milei and his rise to power, they're even further down the road than we are by far. And there really wasn't any hope in Argentina. And now that Javier Milei is in charge, I was just talking to somebody from Argentina this week, actually, and she was telling me how when Javier Milei was elected, there's a renewed hope and there's results coming from a libertarian regime there. So I think it's a very libertarian solution to an age-old question. What do you do when civilization destroys itself? Well, return to principles that create civilization, and freedom is one of those important principles. So a great quote and ultimately timeless.
And we probably will talk a little bit more about Milei a little bit more in the show later on, too, as we compare and contrast what's happening with Trump's big, beautiful budget bill. But what about you, James and Tim? You guys have any thoughts on this quote?
Oh, I hate to quibble with minor details, but oftentimes in history, the civilizations do collapse from within, but they're actually based upon structural. I mean, I suppose you could blame them for not adapting fast enough, but I don't want to quibble. It's close enough for accuracy's sake to make the point. I think is the point is you either allow yourself either through, like us, like deficit spending, or Rome, deficit spending, that type of thing. Or you destroy yourself by not seeing the economic change coming and refusing to adapt. Like, when you go from steam power to oil and to electricity, those countries who didn't adapt are the ones who suffered the longest. And so that's my only quibble. And I'm just in a quibbling mood today, I suspect.
Tim, you going to quibble with James on this?
No, probably not. Hello, Stephen and James and Jason, you guys. Yeah, I like the quote. If we look at the Roman Empire, James brought that up. Overextending its capability to sustain itself. The death of all. What is it? The 7 stages of empire, where you start out lean and mean, and you grow, and then you get more and more rich and wealthy and decadent and so on, and then you start falling off the table or the wagon, literally, probably, and then you start this hunger for empire, which is that's the United States. I mean, we are about as hungry as any nation has ever been, probably hungrier, and we certainly have more influence across more vast areas of the planet Earth than any other empire in the history of mankind, and it shows. We're with our debt and all that, and the debasing of our currency. So and our decadence, you could say that too. That's what happened. I'm a believer in the 7 stages of empire, and I'm also a believer that the United States is in that 7th stage, which is the final stage, which is where we collapse back to the first stage, which is poor and just starting out all over again.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no guarantee that it always gets picked back up and headed in the right direction again. But this is a sort of a timely show because we have some hope. We have the Libertarian Party here, just like they had libertarians in Argentina as well, that we're going to talk about a little bit. But Stephen, you were recently elected chair of the party, and so I guess to start out by asking you, what do you think about the current state of the country?
Sure. So I've been chair for about 90 days so far. I've been on the board of the Libertarian National Committee for 9 years. So by the time I finish this term, it'll be a decade. I used to be chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida for 4 years. Been a candidate before. So I've put the reps in, and I've got to meet a lot of libertarians all around the country and even throughout the world, quite frankly. There's libertarians all around the world, in Argentina, in Cuba, in Russia, in Europe, all over Europe, and many of them are even elected officials. So I see a global libertarian movement, with the U.S. being basically the first, and American libertarians, really leading the charge in creating a lot of the philosophy, a lot of its European American philosophy that's spread into this beautiful movement. And as far as the state of the country, I think we're, every 4 years, every year, I just look and say, wow, what an interesting time. Things seem to be getting more and more interesting as the days go by. And I've yet to be, things cease to continue to get more interesting as time goes on, we'll say. So right now I see us in a very precarious situation. We're basically headed towards what could be World War III. The federal government continues to outspend what it's making, and we are on a fiscal and monetary and potential economic cliff, depending on how things shake out in Washington. You've got an ever more increasing turnkey authoritarian regime or government. The executive branch continues to take more and more power. Congress is really just a cheerleader for whatever the president does. As we could see, and we'll talk a little bit later about the big, beautiful, the big bloated budget, and how that, ironically enough, just a year ago when it was Biden's budget, the Republicans voted against it, and now it's the Democrats voting against it, and basically a couple of congressmen. And so things continue to get more and more interesting, and culturally we're more and more divided, and so we're in very precarious times. And there is some good. There is still hope. There's still people waking up to this fact. And I think, especially lately, after it's been just past Trump's 100 days, A lot of conservatives are looking at the Republican Party and saying, this isn't what I signed up for. So what else is available? There's a lot of, people out there looking for something different. And the Libertarian Party for over 50 years has been the third party. We're continuing. We are the largest third party in the United States. We're
Jay,
on ballot.
Could you bring up the visual real quick? I wasn't sure if that's going to come up when I click it here. So thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the LP page. So while Stephen's talking here, if you want to go check out the page, it's lp.org. So.
And I would encourage your viewers to, if you're interested in libertarianism or the Libertarian Party, if you're libertarian curious, head over there, take a look at our platform, see what we're about. The platform is very, very readable. We basically believe in self-ownership, maximum personal freedom, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. We believe in, holding our government accountable, and essentially we believe that you should be able to live the life you want to live as long as you're not hurting others. That only individuals can forge their ideal life. It's not up to some bureaucrat or your neighbors or anybody else to decide how you want to live and what's best for you. Economically, we're capitalists. We believe in freedom. We believe in free association, the ability to do business, free markets. It's a very beautiful political philosophy. And it's really taken steam over the last 50 years. I would say within the last 10 years or so, I've really seen a big increase in people, especially young people, who are identifying as libertarian or understand what libertarianism is. And I think it's very apparent in the fact that a lot of mainstream politicians are now name dropping the libertarian. Either they're saying, hey, I'm a libertarian, so you should vote for me, or they're blaming the libertarians for everything that's going on. Stephen Miller, he's in the White House. I think he's the one of the advisors on Homeland Security, and he's chief of staff for policy. He recently came out and said, oh, it's these libertarians are talking bad about us Republicans because they're against the big bloated budget, the big beautiful bill, because we're upset that they're cutting taxes without actually cutting the budget. They're just saying, yeah, we're just going to borrow the money. We're going to print it anyway. So, we'll lower your taxes for the next 4 years, and then we'll figure it out later. Libertarians we actually understand that, this can't continue forever. We're the only ones talking about real reform, real change, and we've been very consistent on our policies for the past 50 years, whether it's human freedom, when it comes to civil liberties, when it comes to foreign policy, non-interventionist foreign policy, when it comes to free markets and capitalism, when it comes to decriminalization, legalization of drugs, when it comes to the ability to, you should be able to own a firearm, X, Y, and Z issue. We've been very consistent for the past 50 years, largely due to the fact that our political philosophy is guided by a political ism, where the Republicans and Democrats aren't really conservatives following conservatism or liberals following liberalism or republicanism or democratic-ism. They're very loose beliefs that change periodically. And, quite frankly, both parties are populist.
I think we've seen kind of a musical chairs almost going on between the two parties, where a lot of values that once the left claimed to hold, they seem to have abandoned, and similar on the right. And I think when you talk about interesting times, one of the things I wanted to interject with was, lockdowns. When we had lockdowns with COVID, and it was sort of like the Republicans, even though they did a little better later on lockdowns, they also, kind of caved to 2 weeks to stop the spread. And, and then pretty soon that turned into months, and not all red states were sort of free states during that period of time. So, but, one of the things I found a little bit distressing myself, though, as a libertarian, I felt very clear that this was a mistake going into 2 weeks to stop the spread. But I didn't even feel like that was necessarily that the leadership of the party at that time was making that clear. Did you get that sense? I know you weren't chair back then, but you were, a party member, I guess.
That's one of the big criticisms. And actually, I think it was either March or just maybe, I think in early April, the COVID-19.gov website, if you go online, they actually totally redid it. And it basically confirmed the lab leak theory, all this different things, reversed 180, a lot of the stances that the Biden regime took on COVID. And I came out and basically wrote this nice press release that I sent out to all the members, and sign up on lp.org to the newsletter if you'd like to. You can sign up for free to get those newsletters that we put out. And at the bottom, I said, look, I recognize that in the past we've dropped the ball and we were silent when we should have been very loud. And at the time, I know the position of the past chair was, well, let the candidates talk about it. But the problem, and candidates can certainly talk about it if they want, but I think it's very important that as the Libertarian National Committee and myself as spokesman of the party, it's very important to me that I touch on hot button issues to clarify our stance and to insert our narrative into the world. When I first became chair, I put out a statement on the Israeli Gaza situation and basically said, look, the libertarian foreign policy is that we should not be giving weapons, especially on taxpayers' dime, to any country, whether it's Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, whoever. They're more than welcome to buy it from the free market if that's what they want to do, but taxpayers should not be subsidizing acts of war and creating these entangling alliances that could get us into war with Iran or Russia or China, or doesn't matter who it is. And, basically we're helping these things happen, and we need to return to a foreign policy based on defense and based on the United States and not all these entangling alliances that just, we've lived through for the past 20 years of the global war on terror, and our generation and many generations in the past have had to go through this at least once. So,
not to mention terrorist attacks like the one in January 1st, where the guy rammed the truck in, killed, 8 or 12 people or something like that. That guy was, of course, they didn't go into what it was he was rambling about while he was driving around, but, of course, that never came out. But the scuttlebutt is that he was just a pro-Palestinian guy, and this was in response to our basically us being a huge part, using our planes, using our intelligence, and using our bombs.
In other words, Tim, blowback, like as Ron Paul would say.
Right, blowback. So I mean, if we're the citizens being run over by these vans and so on, then that's a hit on us, and it's in response to our government's interference in these wars. And I agree 100% with Stephen. Hey, if you guys want to duke it out, may the best man win, but don't come to us for help. We'll just stand off to the sidelines. I mean, how has Hamas endangered us? Here in the United States, other than a blowback for our help of Israel. Yeah, that's it. That's all. I just wanted to agree with Stephen on that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that our tax dollars are being spent by our government to commit wars in our name, and then us as citizens not only have to finance it, but ultimately take on the burden of not only financing it, but also the blowback and fighting these wars many times, in many cases, that is exponentially more, worse than just saying, hey, let them take care of it. There's nothing to do with this. We have our domestic issues. Let's keep our tax dollars in our wallets, let American citizens prosper and be free and use their money however they see fit. And even going back to more recent examples, when the United States, through the CIA, went and funded the al-Nusra Front against Libya, I believe it was. It was under the Obama administration, where they were funding and training terrorist moderate rebels to overthrow the Gaddafi regime. They ended up turning into ISIS later on. That was basically al-Qaeda's special forces. So they went on, created ISIS, toppled Libya, and when Libya fell, it turned into, from being under Gaddafi, who was, I'm sure, a dictator and probably not the nicest guy, to open-air slave trades and general chaos. The same thing just happened recently in Syria, and now one of the heads of the Taliban is the new head of state in Syria. Although he's a Western-backed person right now, in 10 years he could be another new enemy.
But he's a great fighter. He's done a lot of fighting. Remember?
Yeah.
Trump said,
yeah,
like killing Americans in Mosul and other places in Afghanistan and bragging about it. Yeah, that kind of fighting. Yeah, he's a fighter. He's definitely a fighter.
And I'm sure everybody's here has read 1984. We were always at war with
Eurasia or whichever.
Eurasia, yeah. And then the next day they were our allies, and then all of a sudden we're some other country. It's like, okay, it's hard to keep track. It's you have to have a whiteboard with a lot of strings attached to figure out who's our friends and who we funded to be our future enemies. So U.S. the failure
can move them around.
Yeah, they're just just change teams whenever it's convenient.
It often feels like, though, as we try to play world policemen, that we're aiming into a crowd, just hoping to hit a bad guy. I mean, it's like we're claiming that we're going after the bad guys, but it's like you said. I mean, we hit one guy, and the guy we thought we were helping turns out to be our enemy the next time around, right? I mean, it's
Saddam Hussein was a U.S. asset when the United States backed him. I think it was to go to war with Iran, or they tried to fight the Iranians. I believe it was I'm pretty sure it was Iran. And I think after they went after Qatar, then we weren't so friendly with them. And so it's just moving around pieces of the chessboard. And a lot of these wars going on in the Middle East has actually been a big part of the immigration crisis in Europe. So all these things have first, second, and third order degree effects that are hard to calculate. And it's crazy to believe that the neoliberals and the neocons in DC continue to push foreign policy. And quite frankly, there's very few people in Congress that have anything. They're not trying to stop it. So it's why I think libertarianism is so important right now. I think it's why it's so important that, for me personally, I feel like we have to push the message. We have to create our own narratives and push them out into the mainstream and move that over to the window. And hopefully we can get some libertarians elected to DC. But in the meantime, we can at least get libertarians elected to local office and improve things in our own lives, where we're the closest to the people, which is in our local communities. And the idea is, down the road in 5 or 10 years, we want to be at parity with the old two parties. We want to be able to compete directly with the Democrats and the Republicans, because right now the Democrats are going through a huge identity crisis. The head of the Democratic Party of Florida recently just resigned and said the Democratic Party in Florida is dead and changed to independent. So they're going through a major crisis, and I think there's a real opportunity over the next few years, if we play our cards right, to in some areas supplant the Democrats.
Well,
so that's our hope.
One of the things I was going to ask you about is because these other two parties, a lot of times they're able to get support because there's so much funding that they have, because as Milton Friedman said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And so a lot of people, they imagine, I'm with this party and there's a lot of money coming in, but there's a reason that money's coming in. It's coming in from concentrated interests who are hoping that big government will turn things their way. What does the Libertarian Party do in order to, I guess, raise the resources to combat that? Because we're essentially saying, hey, we're not trying to get big central planners that are going to steer things your way. We're just trying to give you back your freedom. and a lot of times that's a hard sell. People take that for granted until it's gone, and so I'm just curious of what your thoughts are on that, of how we raise money to compete with the big boys, I guess, on this thing.
Well, I think the easiest thing would be is just to sell out and say we support all the wars, and we'll support any business once they give us money to be if they put us in charge. But in all seriousness, what we're looking at doing, there's 700,000 registered libertarians in the United States that we know of. 33 states have voter registration data. And we're looking to actually go after all those 700,000 libertarians and hopefully get them to sign up and join the Libertarian Party. So that's a part of, we just relaunched what's called Project Archimedes, which was a successful project we did back in the late 90s, early 2000s that brought the biggest increase in membership and fundraising growth to the Libertarian Party ever. And so we're hoping to replicate that on a modern level. For the 27 states that we don't have registration data on, we're hoping to create some models and go after people, voters or likely libertarians, and get them to join the party. Other than that, a lot of it's just relationships with big donors and small donors, keep people engaged, and just showing people that we mean business. And that means getting libertarians elected. That means talking about the philosophy, pushing legislation like Defend the Guard. All those things are important. But ultimately, the biggest thing is a lot of people don't know we exist. So getting on the radar is certainly number one, but going up to people that already identify with the Libertarian Party or identify as libertarians is probably the lowest hanging fruit. And then from there, we just have to find other people who are disaffected by the system and persuade them to join.
Well, and that does bring up an interesting point, because it's like you're saying, a lot of people don't know we're even there. And I'll often hear people confuse our name with like librarians or something else like that. And one of the things is that it's not a simple path, I guess, to get to this libertarian position. So many of us are raised through government schools, and we tend to get taught in those schools that government is a solution to problems, and you vote for solutions and other things like that instead of allowing markets. And so it's to get those solutions from the bottom up. And I guess how do we reach these people? I mean, and that also makes me wonder too, what was your journey? How did you discover this as well?
Yeah. So, back in high school, I started to do a lot of reading. I read The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, which is probably the greatest book on the Federal Reserve System. I probably read that when I was like 14 or 15 years old. Got really into G. Edward Griffin's work with Freedom Force International. I remember he even had these DVDs, Project Red Pill, he would call it. And it was like a bunch of documentaries, libertarian documentaries. And he encouraged people to burn it and give it to friends. So I would go to school with these burned DVDs, the Project Red Pill, that I created like a DVD maker program, hand them out to friends and teachers and stuff like that, and just talk about all this stuff. And, he taught me a lot about individualism versus collectivism. What really is freedom versus democracy, or what's the difference between a democracy and a republic, and the role of government and all these different things. And so I knew I wasn't a Republican or a Democrat. When I went to college, I got involved with Young Americans for Liberty at FIU, and a lot of the guys there were Rothbardians and Misesians and libertarian, anarcho-capitalists, minarchists, etc. And I went to Paul Fest in Tampa in 2012, and I met Gary Johnson there when he was running for the presidential the first time. And I was like, wow, here's a guy. I saw the platform. I was like, I'm in. Legalize weed, lower taxes, whatever. And I thought it was very appealing. So I registered as a libertarian once Ron Paul lost the primary. And I just got more involved in the philosophy. I started to debate it. I started to learn more about it, read books. I had a lot of influence from friends. And then a buddy of mine, Mike Kane, down in the Keys, he called me one day.
Let me just interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
If you're watching us on public access, you're going to have to hear the rest of Stephen's story online. So you can go check us out there. Back to you, Stephen.
Yeah. And so my buddy Mike Kane down here in the Keys, he goes, hey, you're on the voter rolls. Would you like to, you're a libertarian. Do you want to help create a Libertarian Party of the Florida Keys affiliate down here in the Keys? I said, sure. I get back home in 9 months. I finish college. I'll hit you up then. So 9 months later, I hit him up, and we created the Libertarian Party of the Florida Keys affiliate. Became more involved then and helped on a few campaigns and got to speak in City Hall and stuff like that, which was really awesome. And then I got involved with the Libertarian Party of Florida, was region rep, eventually at large, became chair, got involved with the Libertarian National Committee a couple of years after I got involved in the Keys, 2016 era. Been involved ever since. And so it's kind of snowballed my journey into the party. I was involved in cryptocurrency for a little while as well out of college, and just everything kind of brought me closer and closer to the philosophy. But overall, the reason I think it attracted me so much is it seemed to be the closest thing to a panacea to most of the world's problems. I saw it as a great solution to most of the problems that we have today, at least politically, and maybe socially in some aspects as well. But I'm a true believer in the libertarian philosophy, that's for sure. And I think you asked earlier, how do we get to the people? How do I identify the people that are more likely to be libertarian? And what's something interesting you'll notice is that in states like California, where it's technically a uniparty blue state, libertarians tend to be a little bit more, and I hate to use this term, but right wing, or they tend to prioritize certain typically, let's say, economic issues, right, or more right-wing states, there's people that typically prioritize certain liberal issues or more socially, let's say, like more social issues, for instance. So you see this a recurring common denominator amongst libertarians tends to be, and this isn't always the case, but in general, you tend to see people who no longer trust the institutions. So if I no longer believe my government's ever going to help me, well, this philosophy that says you need to be self-sufficient, the government's not the answer, it's not coming to help you. And a lot of people come to libertarianism in many different ways. For instance, I know a lot of guys in the military that became libertarian, and they served 10 years in the military. And they're like, yeah, I mean, I saw so much waste. I saw so many things I disagreed with. And as soon as I got out, now I'm a libertarian. Like, this is my foreign policy view. I went down the rabbit hole, and now I'm here. So everybody kind of has their libertarian story, how they got here. I don't know how many people, are just like, yeah, one day I woke up and became a libertarian because my parents were libertarians, something like that. It usually doesn't happen. There's usually, something that got you here. And so I think when people realize, okay, number one, the Republicans and Democrats aren't going to fix my problems. And then number two, there's this beautiful philosophy that I think, just makes so much sense intellectually and emotionally. And libertarians tend to be very intellectually driven. It's once you're libertarian, it's once you take that red pill, it's hard to ever go back into the matrix. You kind of, everything just makes sense. It's like, oh, well, things just sort of fall into place. So,
it's a real rabbit hole too, because for me, it was sort of John Stossel to Milton Friedman, and then Milton Friedman. Then I start finding out about these Austrians who don't quite agree with Milton Friedman, and then it's an endless rabbit hole into liberty philosophy.
And then you get a bunch of libertarians in a room, and you're going to have a bunch of different ideas on the same issue. Sometimes, it's there's a lot of cutting of hairs that can be done. But I think that as far as libertarians go, whether you're a classical liberal, a minarchist, an anarchist, a Milton Friedman libertarian, or some flavor in between, I mean, I think we're on a 100-mile journey, and we're arguing over the last 3 exits. Let's just get to exit number 96, and then we'll figure out, where we want to stop along the way, because the country will be such a drastically better place, and the world will be so much better if we can just get, most of what we want. It would be the most radical shift in politics that could be imaginable.
Well, one thing I did want to turn the conversation just a little bit toward, I guess, party politics on this one thing. And because you've just been elected, and the last chair that you followed, they had a strategy of, I guess, trying to expand the stage, I guess, to bring other people in. And so we had a convention where we literally had Donald Trump and Robert Kennedy, among others, who were also there as well, who weren't libertarians, but they were speaking at our event. In fact, I did want to play just a little video clip so people get a sense of that. And then I just kind of want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that's the way going forward? So I'm going to play this video clip 1.
Quite the media show happening at our national convention. People are referring to it informally as Libertarian Woodstock on social media.
So you are inviting Donald Trump to attend. We're watching him right now in the Bronx. He'll be there tomorrow, on Saturday, I believe. RFK Jr. will also be there. RFK Jr., independent. Donald Trump, as we know, a Republican. Why are you allowing, in theory, the opponents into your living room?
Well, for 50 plus years, the Libertarian Party has been trying to get onto the main debate stage with the two-party candidates for president, and it hasn't happened yet. So we have decided to bring the debate stage to our convention. Now, we're not having a traditional debate since we couldn't quite rope those candidates into it, but we're getting as close as we can, which is that we're going to be debating on the same stage with them within a very close proximity of the time that they're speaking.
So that was Angela Cardle, and she was the last chair. But I'm just curious, going forward, do you think that that's a good strategy, or would you have a different philosophy, I guess, in trying to break us out and reach more people?
It's I was actually quoted in, I think, in CNN saying that Trump is not a libertarian. He's a far cry from a libertarian. He's barely a conservative by conservative standards. And so I wasn't exactly thrilled when I learned he was coming to our convention. I wasn't a part of that that process or that decision, but it was interesting to have him there. I was pretty close to the front row when he went and spoke, and a lot of libertarians booed him, and the media got to see what libertarians think of Trump. So having him there, was it a good idea? Was it a bad idea? I think it's up to debate. I think I can make a strong argument that, in either way, that was it good for us to have him there for the publicity? Was it bad for a whole lot of reasons? It caused a lot of internal strife. And for that alone, I think it's probably not worth it. But I think the broader question is should libertarians work with or depend on Republicans? And I think the answer to that is very clear. The Tea Party was born in the GOP, and that was a short-lived movement. It was eventually co-opted and absorbed into the greater Republican movement. The Federalists, or it should be the Federalists were absorbed into the Federalist movement during the founding of the country. And essentially, anytime you have a smaller movement try to work with a larger movement, you're going to have them get absorbed. So I think we have to be so careful about how we approach Republicans or Democrats in any capacity. I think that anybody who believes that the GOP wants to work with libertarians is very naive, in the sense that we think if anybody believes we have a seat at the table, we don't. You don't have a seat at the table when you're on the menu. And I can tell you, being in the Libertarian Party for as long as I have, which isn't as long as many people in the party, we've faced ballot access hurdles for, at this point, since '94, since Ross Perot ran. In Texas in 2020, the Republicans tried to sue us off the ballot, but they couldn't get to us in time. The Democrats successfully sued the Green Party off the ballot. I can tell you in many states, the Republicans give us a hard time, and they like it that way. And the Democrats like it that way too. So just the millions of dollars we've spent in ballot access in order to maintain ballot access, and not even counting to get there, and their unwillingness to basically have a true democracy and allow us to play on the same rules that they play by. There's states where, a Republican or Democrat can get 500 signatures to get on the ballot, and we have to get something like 15,000 or whatever the case is for that state. And if we lose 3% in a gubernatorial election, we have to start all over again. It's going to cost us at least $1 million to get ballot access again in New York. And so it's a very tough game where there's a group of libertarians, Larry Sharp, Lars Mapstead, Oliver Hall, and a few others are working together to approach secretaries of state and try to get them to change the law state by state at the top level, and make ballot access easier so we don't have to spend as much money. But, it's clear to me that until the Republicans and Democrats come together and say, yeah, we're at least going to let you compete with us the same way we compete with each other, they appreciate that level of exclusivity and they want to keep those barriers high. I don't think Trump is likely to ever debate one of our candidates. I know we tried in the past to get him to debate our people. We asked the Biden people if they want to debate. Clearly when Gary Johnson got a couple percent of the vote, I think it was like 2.5%. In some states it was as high as 4.5%. And Joe Jorgensen as well beat the spread. So that political capital right there is saying, well, we have enough of a voting bloc that we could sway an election. And I think that's very powerful. What we don't want to do is squander that. What I would like to see the party do is grow that. And what I mean by that is we need to grow our own personal power. The party needs to gain its own political power and stand on its own 2 feet, financially, politically, electorally, and continue to grow. I'd like to see the party get 5%. I'd like to see the party get 15%. I'd like to see the party do much, much better in these gubernatorial elections and these presidential elections, because as we grow, guess what? Stephen Miller gets to post more on X about how bad we are. and Republicans and Democrats have to try to appeal to the libertarian voting bloc. And maybe they throw in a few policy bones and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And maybe they do it, which is good because we're moving the Overton window in our direction. But ultimately, we're gaining momentum. And, aside from that, we also need to focus locally on actually winning elections and getting libertarians in office. But, again, I think it's okay to have conversations with the Republicans and Democrats if there's a real conversation to be had, depending. It's very contextual. But it's certainly, I think, unwise to believe that we can have any meaningful relationship at the national level with the GOP and the Dems. I don't think that's I don't see that ever being in the cards. We're just too adversarial.
Well, I think one area that really might help to illuminate some of the difference between Republicans and libertarians, because I think a lot of people already see there's a big difference between libertarians and Democrats. I mean, a lot of times they assume we're far right is what they'll call us, which I think that's a little bit off. But the is this big beautiful budget that we're hearing so much about nowadays. And James, maybe you could bring up the visual real quick. So this is a BBC article about the budget that just passed the House. And, they've got a bunch of the specifics that are in here. There's things that kind of sound good, they're taking away taxes on certain things. But the problem really is that they're not touching the spending that much. And so this is one of the problems we're seeing. And so I did have a video that I think really shows the difference between what Trump is saying is big and beautiful and what maybe some of the more liberty-oriented politicians out there like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie are saying. So maybe, James, maybe we could play KOL 2.
We're working very hard on a great, big, beautiful bill, and we're trying to come up with a name. And I said, why don't we just go with the great, big, beautiful bill? That's what everyone, so we're going to probably do that. We love that bill. I won't like it if it doesn't pass. Neither will you. It doesn't pass, your taxes are going to go up 68%. To show you how middle income this is, there'll be no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax for the great seniors in Social Security.
The House bill is going to add about $4 trillion to the debt ceiling. The Senate bill adds $5 trillion. There's nothing fiscally conservative about expanding the debt ceiling more than we've ever done it before. This will be the greatest increase in the debt ceiling ever, and GOP owns this now. The deficit this year will be $2.2 trillion.
This bill dramatically increases deficits in the near term, but promises our government will be fiscally responsible 5 years from now. Where have we heard that before? How do you bind a future Congress to these promises? This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math, if it wants, but bond investors don't. And this week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy our debt and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on the 10-year note, the 20-year note, and the 30-year note. What does this mean? Very soon, the government will be paying $16,000 of interest alone per U.S. family. And what are we telling them? Instead of taking care of that problem, we're going to give you a $1,600 tax break. Under the taxing and spending levels in this bill, we're going to rack up, the authors say, $20 trillion of new debt over the next 10 years. I'm telling you, it's closer to $30 trillion of new debt in the next 10 years. Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing. I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both.
So there you have it. I think that kind of really illuminates maybe the difference between more liberty-oriented, libertarian-oriented people, even though they're sort of hiding out in the Republican Party, and maybe the rank and file of the GOP. So what are your thoughts on that, Stephen?
As Justin Amash called it, the big bloated bill. I think this is really a shining moment for libertarians to say, I told you so, because I told you so. There's a lot of people, and I've just been on X for the past 90 days, so I don't know how well X actually translates into the real world, but a lot of high-profile conservative influencers are really starting to turn coat. A lot of libertarians in the libertarian movement that were Trump supporters for their own personal reasons are starting to turn coat over that and a lot of other things they've seen over the last 100 days. And I'm not surprised. I think to expect anything different than what we've seen, once the excitement and the novelty wears off of a new term of a president or a new Congress or whatever, what's the result? And you've got very principled people like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul, who Trump is attacking, because they're actually true conservatives, true fiscal conservatives. And I actually put something out when Trump went after Massey the first time, not including the second time, stating that, the Libertarian Party supports Massey and appreciates the fact that he can be principled on Capitol Hill. At least somebody can. And one of the reasons that was important to me, even though he is technically a Republican, is it just shows the contrast between, if you think this is how if this is how they treat members of their own party when they're enacting our fiscal policies, imagine how they treat us, and imagine what they think of us, when we're out here spouting what we're spouting, saying what we're saying, championing what we're championing. And so, the fact that the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who is a very successful businessman, who launches rockets into space, who's created all these businesses and wealth and jobs and, has done the American dream. He went in trying to fix DC and tried to lower the federal deficit by even $1, was unsuccessful. And he came out and said, you know what? The only thing preventing collapse is that GDP outpaces spending. So I'm just going to focus on increasing United States GDP instead. That's an easier task than getting a room of a couple hundred congressmen to actually vote to cut a deficit. So I think, as the kids would say, Elon Musk is very black-pilled at the moment. I think he's losing institutional trust like many of us already have. And I think if we continue down this road, which it seems inevitable at this point, unless something major happens, we're heading towards a fiscal cliff, which means more inflation, which means less wealth, which means degraded savings, which means basically we're heading down the path of the third world. We're turning into a second-rate country. So how long can we sustain this is to be seen. And I think historically, when you start to see those fiscal fissures start to burst, very unpredictable things can happen. The government might decide to do something crazy. They might decide to get into a new war. They might decide to, who God knows what. So culturally, things can shift. As people get poor, people get more desperate. So I think it's so important now more than ever that libertarians come out and number one, point out the hypocrisy, have our Sermon on the Mount moment where we're pointing out that, hey, the Pharisees are a bunch of hypocrites. And, this is the way. It's either it's libertarianism and what we're proposing, or, things are going to turn out very, very badly. And so, unfortunately, we don't have billions of dollars and, we don't have members of Congress, although we did have Justin Amash for a while there. And, we certainly like our Masseys and our Rand Pauls and appreciate what they're doing, but it's certainly not enough. One of the most ironic things is during Trump's State of the Union address is when he spoke before Congress and they all applauded the Doge findings, of all the waste, fraud, and abuse that they turned around and are now voting for. And the Republicans control the executive branch, Congress, and the judiciary. So they have no excuse not to do all the things they've been campaigning on for 2 decades, reverse Obamacare, lower the deficit, all these great things. And there's a saying that there's no one more libertarian than a Republican when he's not in office. But as soon as he gets into office, he turns into, basically a Bernie Sanders socialist. And it was actually quite interesting when Trump was going on his tariff crusade. And he said, why does a little girl need more than 2 options for dolls? Then I just thought of when Bernie Sanders was saying, well, why does anybody need 20 brands of deodorant? I guess there's like a horseshoe, there where, it's just very interesting how politicians speak and how statists speak, and they get to the same conclusions. But yeah, our work's definitely cut out for us. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think Bernie and Trump have been hitting that same crack pipe together. James or Tim, did you guys want to jump in on this, budget fiasco that,
Oh, the budget fiasco? No, because this is. I know how many times I have to cover this budget fiasco on my show of various issues. These guys are hypocrites. They're spending us into oblivion. It's like a recurring theme. I say it in some form every week. And so it's just it's more of the same, which is sad, but it's just more of the same.
Well, go ahead, Tim. Are you going to jump in?
Yeah, Rand Paul a few years back had a bill that he proposed, and it was for a modest cut in spending, or the increase in spending. It was really like 3% or something. He got a few Republicans to sign on to it. I think Thomas Massey and maybe Justin was still involved at that time, and Rand Paul. But of course him, because he proposed it. But he didn't get a single Democrat to want to even touch. I mean, so it makes me wonder, in a country that's getting in as much debt as we are, is there a single dime that they would cut anywhere at any time? Is just anything, a penny? I mean, what? I don't get it. And within the next 3 years, 75% of that debt is coming due. Okay, the treasury bonds are due. It's going to be refinanced. Somebody else has to buy it, and that probably will be the Federal Reserve. But and when they do, the government's going to have to pay higher interest on that debt. So Stephen brings up a very palatable problem, and with no solution, because at least the people that are in power now have absolutely zero interest. Very few Republicans and all the Democrats have absolutely zero interest in bringing spending down at all. And so this just simply portends a much higher debt, and whatever happens due to that higher debt. Now Elon's saying he's going to try to increase the productivity of the United States to try to keep up with the debt, keep ahead of it, and more power to him. And I hope that's a good plan, but it still begs. It's like, geez, is there anything that you would cut? I just don't get it. Anything.
Well, Tim, we've seen it. Even the most silly spending, they will defend. Even the silliest spending on the planet, they will defend it, simply because it's helping somebody allegedly, maybe, and that's their excuse, right? It's all emotionalism at some point.
I imagine it's vote getting too. They've got a lot of people beholden to their, handing out the grade.
Oh, that's a whole nother issue. All these NGOs who end up with employees who are dependent upon getting grants, that are dependent upon government funding, all kinds of ludicrous stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It becomes a thing.
I think there should be an amendment
So let's circle back to our original quote at the beginning of the thing about crumbling from within. And now is that quote making sense to anyone listening? If it hasn't made sense up till now, it destroys itself from within. And so James came out with an example of NGOs as part of that destruction of the United States of America from within.
Yeah, and the worst part is you have a lot of nonprofits that could do really good work if their hands weren't tied by some kind of either government grants, because they become dependent on them, or they become dependent on government grants because of regulations don't allow them to raise money easily. And so either way, these nonprofits that could very well do good work on their own end up getting caught in the same process.
Well, one thing I wanted to show real quick too is Massey said something that I think is a real great analogy, and that's the idea that we're the Titanic and we're headed toward that debt iceberg. And I think there's some visuals out there that really help us to see that. And Jane, maybe you could bring up the visuals, but I'm just going to bring up a few, and these are from our government. So our government is literally telling us we're doing this to ourselves, and they're the ones who are doing it, right? So they got no reason to lie. If they wanted to lie, they'd make it less dramatic. This, we've shown this chart a lot of times on the show, but this is the debt to GDP. And you can see over 100 years, World War II is the big spike, right? That's where we were at over 100% debt to GDP. And they have us heading out to the stratosphere right now, is where the Congressional Budget Office thinks we're going. This coming year, they're saying that of the ranked order of government spending, they're now saying 14% in interest. That's the second highest item on the list of spending. So it's paying interest on debts, and part of that is because as Tim was saying, our interest rates are going up. You want to see a hockey stick that is existential. You need look no further than our national debt. You don't need to worry about climate as much as you need to worry about this. Okay.
I have to remind anyone listening or interested that spike in World War II, that was from existing money. So people were turning their savings into war bonds. People were buying war bonds with their own money. So that spike up there, that's already created money that was being utilized to, for the fund the government's war efforts. Now, that differs from the second spike, which is brand new money, vast majority of it created by the Fed, not all of it, but created by the Fed, that big spike. So that's the difference. One, you're just basically taking money from your savings and you're putting it into government debt, and they're paying it back, and ostensibly it's going to go into savings and then spending and so on. But in the other one, it's just created money, and wherever it goes, wherever it ends up, and it'll end up somewhere, is going to increase inflation. And so here we are.
Well, and what this means to your pocketbook as a citizen, and I encourage every person to go and look at the national debt clock, the U.S. debt clock here. Almost 37 trillion is where we're at, and Rand Paul was literally saying we're going to add another 2.2 to that this year. And he's talking about raising the ceiling to 4. And what that translates is it's debt per citizen. For every individual owes over 100,000 because of what the government's put us into. So I mean, and you can just see all these alarming numbers. Go explore it. It's certainly worth a few moments of your time what the government is exposing you to.
Actually, Jason, it's worse than death per citizen. You look at that debt per taxpayer number.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the actual scary one, right?
Exactly, because a bunch of little kids who aren't paying taxes yet. This should scare the hell out of them. Read this to them at night before they go to bed, and they're not going to go to bed. They're just going to sit there shaking in their
My
boots.
daughter's 3 years old, and she owes a lot of money, and it's not just.
And look at the Doge savings per taxpayer. It saved $4,000 per taxpayer.
Yeah,
that's and look at how many people were upset over that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, all the consternation we've had over saving $4,000 per taxpayer.
That's absolutely nuts. But I did want to leave us with an optimistic note on this story. And I did have a video about how Milei, a libertarian, a self-described libertarian, is handling this in Argentina. And he's handling it in a different way. He's making the hard cuts that people like Thomas Massey and Rand Paul are saying that we need to take on, and the Libertarian Party here, of course, would be telling us we need to take on. So, yeah, James, can you play KOL 3?
Now, Milei is a former economics academic and radio host, the free market libertarian, who was elected president just over a year ago after promising shock therapy for Argentina's sick economy, promising to put a chainsaw almost literally through government spending to actually scrap 11 of the 19 government departments.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera.
But something had to be done in Argentina. A year ago, it was a basket case. Left-wing and populist politicians had destroyed one of the world's richer countries. Inflation was more than 200%. Half the people were living in poverty. The economy was in deep recession. Government debt and taxes sky high.
So that's who Milei is, and that's also the situation he was in, and it wasn't a good situation. So after a year, how did his libertarian philosophy carry out as the head of a country? Let's find out.
Patrick Horan, thank you so much indeed for joining me. What has Milei done in his year and a bit, and has it worked?
So the Milei administration has cut federal spending by about 30%. It's cut the number of federal ministries in half. And then on average, it has removed about one regulation per day across a variety of sectors: housing, imports, airlines, etc. And so far, Milei's approach has been working very well in many ways. Inflation has fallen substantially. The country is running budget surpluses for the first time since 2020, and the economy has emerged out of a recession. The economy had been in a recession when Milei first took office. It briefly got worse, but now the country's out of recession, and Argentina is forecasted to have a good year in 2025. It's forecasted to have strong growth, about 5% real GDP growth, and it's forecasted for inflation to keep falling.
And one thing that I cut off before you said it, but he actually said that, and with all this cutting, Milei is actually over 50% in popularity in Argentina. So, I mean, it can be done. I mean, this is like a Milei miracle here, but he's showing what a libertarian can do if we get these libertarian values going. So anyways, do you guys have any thoughts about Milei and what he's doing?
So I don't remember if I said it earlier in the show or when before we got on, but I was talking to a friend recently about that at my gym, and she's from Argentina, libertarian gym too, by the way, down here in Key West, Old Town Fitness. And we were talking about Milei, and she was saying how fantastic it is that they have Milei in Argentina, and how hopeful they are, and how inflation is down, and how their money is worth more, and how life is better. People are spending money. People are even going overseas and traveling, and things are just so much better. I also have a friend who escaped Argentina in 2001 after the financial crisis, where crime just skyrocketed. And he actually has a book called Surviving the Economic Collapse by Fairfell Aguirre. You can get it on Amazon. It was a great book. That's how I met him. And and he talks all about, what life was like then, and he does say how things are a little better now, but he lives outside of there. But it's interesting to see how a country like Argentina was so wealthy and rich and collapsed, but was able to rebound through libertarian policy. And when Javier Milei was elected as the president, the first libertarian president, it started a domino effect of these libertarian parties in South America starting to rise. I actually spoke with the Libertarian Party chair of Venezuela. He's in hiding because the government wants to arrest him for organizing libertarians.
I didn't know we had libertarian in Venezuela.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be. It's definitely not a sanctioned political party, that's for sure. There's even a libertarian party in Cuba. There's a libertarian party of Jose Marti Cuba, and they're similarly very persecuted. They're only allowed to be one political party in Cuba. That's the Communist Party. And so competitors are not allowed, as a true free market and democracy. I'm sure Bernie Sanders would be very proud of the Cuban government. There's Libertarian Party in Russia. There's Libertarian Party in the country of Georgia. The Georgian president was just arrested actually a couple of days ago. I put out a statement about that. But there's also libertarian parties in places like Estonia and different parts of Europe that are politically successful. The Libertarian Party of, I believe it's the Czech Republic, is actually quite a good party over there. They actually have a lot of political success. These libertarian parties, because the barriers of entry are less and they have more of a parliamentary system, actually do get to see real political success in those countries. So it's not just a far-fetched idea. They're actually winning elections and getting results. And I think as of a couple of weeks ago, there's been the launch of the Libertarian Party of the United Kingdom, and they're running candidates. And I can tell you, being on the call with the International Alliance of Libertarian Parties, they look up to us in the United States. They see us as the first, and they follow what we do. And we're inspiring a whole bunch of libertarian activists and politicians and thinkers all throughout the world. So it's a global phenomenon. Argentina has been wildly successful. His Libertarian Party is gaining ground there. And in the United States, I think we have similar opportunities. So on a positive note, people ask me if I'm optimistic, and I am still optimistic. I think, unfortunately, things have to get a little worse before they get better. But I think there is a market out there for libertarians. And I was doing a little bit of math a couple of weeks ago, and there's about 260 voting Americans in the United States, or adults that can vote. Of them, the Republicans and Democrats make up around something like 30 million, 50 million, something about that of the adult population. And then I was looking at some numbers as to what percentage of them actually donate to their political parties respectively, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, state, county, or national level. And it's about 0.5% to 1.5%. So right now we probably have about 0.0004% actually contributing to, of our libertarians, the ones we know about, contributing to our libertarian parties at some level. So I think there's a huge untapped market to get these people energized and involved and donating, and also get them engaged locally to run as a candidate and all these different things. And so I'm hoping in my tenure as chair to really engage these people. We're working with a data firm. We've got some really smart people on our staff that we're working with. We've got some, some big ideas that we're hoping that if we're successful, we can energize the libertarian population in the United States, and prospect new libertarians. And, there's a snowball effect there. And hopefully we can hit that upward spiral where we're really able to engage and find new members, because as a political philosophy, we need members. If we were starting a new church, we would need members. Probably not much difference in dogma between religion and politics, to be honest, especially these days. But truly, we need to recruit as our number one priority. And so, I think getting people engaged. I think there's a big enough market for freedom out there that we just need to be good capitalists and take our market share. And so, I'm hopeful for the future.
Hey, Stephen, in the last few years, for a wide variety of reasons, I've noticed it here at the local level, and I'm sure you guys have noticed it at the national level, that there's a group of people who have, I don't necessarily want to say walked away, but who are no longer participating for various reasons. And how do you get those back, both locally and on a bigger problem nationally? Because I'm going to speak for myself, but I know I actually speak for others. If you don't travel to national convention, you don't have a say in who the party members are and who the chair is and so in a sense, until you can help those people become engaged, actively engaged and feel some skin in the game, how are you going to get them involved? I've always said we should actually do our chair votes, our board member votes, same way Disney votes for their board members. The same way any corporation does. And if you are a dues-paying member, you get a vote. You don't have to show up at the convention. You vote before, and the convention is when the winners are announced. And the convention floor deals with anything that's needs to be dealt with, right? If there's a tie or something goofy like that. But so I guess my big question is, how do we both here on the local level start to re-engage these people who have left? Our best activists either move or aren't participating because we're in California, they're government workers and are afraid to participate. Or how do you get people like me re-engaged into the national level because I can't participate? So if I can't participate, why bother?
That's a really good question, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while. And I think at some level, I've seen a lot of people that have been old timers who've left. Some of them have come back. But even if we have a 100% retention rate as a national party, people are still going to die. They're still going to, they're going to move out of the country. They're going to retire. Something's going to happen, right? So if our retention rate's probably more realistic, 30, 40, 50%, maybe if it's even high as 60%, we still need to engage new people. And, people like us, we're kind of like third shift at the Waffle House, smoking cigarettes behind the dumpster. We've been doing it for a long time. And so, the new kid comes up and he's like, I'm ready to learn how to clean tables today or something like that, right? We need more new blood in the party. And I think ultimately the only way we're going to survive, it's not going to be, retention is great. Don't get me wrong. I want to keep people in the party. I want to get people to come back that have experience and skills. But I think ultimately the only solution is growing. We need to outgrow our level of loss, essentially, our level of burnout, our level of lack of retention. And the LNC recently voted. We had a couple conversations, and we voted that, hey, our number one priority is fundraising and membership growth, full stop. And for states out there that want to be a part of that, there's a unified membership program where we can, as we onboard new members, we can also onboard them into your state party and they can donate and get involved. But we're hoping that a rising tide does raise all ships. And with this Project Archimedes, we're hoping to bring in so many new people like it did back in the 2000s, that we can bring in the next generation of new blood that hopefully will be the next chairman of the Libertarian Party, because I'm not going to be doing this forever. And, we need new people. We need candidates to run. We need people to take up local office. And so a big part of it is going to be having our arms open for new people to come in and make sure they feel welcomed and give them the tools they need to succeed. So, I hope that answers the question, but I think the simple answer is more growth.
Well, I know it's kind of late for you out there, Stephen, on the left coast, I guess, and it's probably 11:30. So I think probably now is probably a good time to start to wrap up. And so I did want to bring up a few of your pages real quick. James,
Sure.
Could you bring up the visuals here? So this is Stephen's X page, so you can follow his posts here. So that's at x.com, just his name, Stephen Nekhaila. And then, the LP page, we talked about that before, and bring that back up here. And then you can also, too, read a little bit about Stephen getting elected as chair. We didn't get too far into the politics of all that. And there's also an article on Reason as well, if you want to dig in a little more. But otherwise, I can't think of much else. I think we'll just save our Knucklehead Noise Patrol for another time. But did any of you guys have any last thoughts you wanted to share with Stephen before we wrap up? Or Stephen, did you have any parting shots too?
The only thing I'll say to your audience is if they like to consider the Libertarian Party, go over to lp.org, sign up for our newsletter. If you support the mission, what we're trying to accomplish here, and you want to save America and the world, become a sustaining donor. You donate $5 a month or $25 a year. And you don't have to change political party or anything like that. You can simply become a member, reap all the benefits. And I would encourage folks to join their state party. I would encourage folks to join their county affiliate, get involved, go to a couple meetings, and read about the philosophy, read about the party. And if you're not already on board, consider getting involved. And we'd love to have you as a member. And if you have any questions for me, contact information is on lp.org. Check out the site, check out the platform. And I appreciate you guys for having me on this evening. It was fun.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. You're very motivating.
Yeah.
You're a motivating speaker, like a motivational speaker.
No, we're definitely happy to have you there. And so I definitely encourage people to go check that site out. And before our next show, if you're watching, think about what you could do to move the ball for liberty in your community. Because as Stephen said, this is a group effort. You can see all these people out there are eroding your liberty one day at a time. And if we don't stand up, we could lose it someday. So get out there and do something in your community to move the ball for liberty. Until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.